Well, they need more money in their coffers so that they can bribe politicians to propel their agenda forward, because they're some of the greatest contributors to, in terms of donations, millions and millions and millions of dollars they donate to the coffers of politicians so that when they get elected, they'll do whatever the union bosses dictate that they do. Now, I had read in something I was reading about you, David, that your wage and benefit package was higher than what unions employees were being paid when they started to approach your company to try to organize your company.
Well, that's right, and I'll tell you an interesting side story on that. The unions also use a group called the Interfaith Workers Justice Group out of Chicago. And by the way, they're the group that picketed Andrew Breitbart and Beck in Chicago last week. And the gal that led it was the same gal that led a campaign against us here in Indianapolis. But we had a meeting with them, and my daughter, who was our HR director at the time, was with me. And we went in and sat down and talked to the clergy people at their request. And the first thing they said is, we want you to be neutral, which meant they wanted us to sign this neutrality agreement.
Right.
And I looked at the minister, who was a Methodist minister, and I said, have you ever seen a neutrality agreement? And he says, no. I said, why would you want me to sign one then? He says, because we want you to be union. And the next guy, clergyman, was a Catholic priest, and I happen to be Catholic. And I looked at him and I said, Father, do you understand that our people already in the cities where we do business and the unions at make as good or better wages and better benefits? We have state-of-the-art equipment because we have our own supply company and chemicals. We have our own safety director and trainer and quality control. And we are known to treat our people right. And he looked at me and he says, Mr. Bego, we don't care about the facts. All we care about is your union.
Right. And, it's really amazing to me, honestly, David. I'm always amazed, and I don't even know why I'm amazed anymore by what I see taking place between this connection between unions and many, not all, but some of the clergy or men of the cloth out there who somehow have this misguided notion of this collectivism ideology, and they entirely forgot, for those of them who are Christian, they forgot the whole ideology of through salvation is on an individual basis. It isn't a collective salvation, and their role, even though they use the term justice, what they're really promoting is injustice.
Well, that's right. And it's interesting you bring that up. I happened to be this morning at a coffee shop getting a cup of coffee, and my local pastor was there, and we were talking about this, and he made the same comment as you, is, everybody has to be responsible for themselves. And, we all have to be our brother's keeper, but in the end, social justice is a worn-out term, and that's what the unions are using to justify what they do.
Well, sure it is, and actually social justice is the absence of justice. It's the absence of morality, because true social justice, if that indeed was a term that we wanted to use here, would be to begin with yourself first, because you have an obligation, you have a moral obligation to yourself first. And then from there flows any kind of benevolence that you may want to be involved in. But that doesn't mean that someone else has the right to dictate or take from you just because in their mind they think they deserve or someone else deserves whatever it is you have. And so that's an absence of morality, what they're doing. That's not social justice at all. It's absolutely amoral what they're doing.
Well, and I agree with you 100%. And when I sat down, and it was actually at a lunch here in Indianapolis when the SEIU kind of gave me the final ultimatum, and the guy looked at me and said, "You're not going to sign this agreement, are you?" And I said, morally, I can't do that.
No.
I have to look out for everybody in my company. I have to look out for my employees, and I can't do those things.
Right.
And they just looked at me and said, "Okay, we're coming after you." And but they justify this because the truth is, it's about power and money, and you were right before. What they're looking for is to increase their membership ranks, have the dues coming in, and they use that to influence politicians and move us closer to a socialistic type of government.
Right. Well, one of the things I had read was about the judge in California who directed the SEIU to stop packing in a hospital emergency room with fake patients with the intent of disrupting service. Now, if they want to talk about social justice, how much justice is there when they do those kinds of things, go into an environment where people are sick and in need, and they're playing this game with fake patients to disrupt the environment? Are they really concerned with the welfare of their fellow man? I say not.
I'm glad you did your homework. Not many people have brought that up, but it's true. But you have to understand the ends justify the means.
Well, in their mind, but it doesn't, the ends don't justify the means for people who actually stand up for what is right.
Well, I agree with you 100%, and that's why I wrote the book. You know, I never wanted to be an author. I never wanted to be involved like I am. In fact, I was kind of basically apolitical 5 years ago. I did my job and voted and all that. But since I've gotten into this and I understand what's going on, not just at the level I went through, but what's going on at a national level, and how they're trying to basically take control of our government. Because, you know, in my blog today, and I think maybe you saw it, Andy Stern has a lot of influence on the White House.
Oh, yes, he does. I know he does.
And we have a man with that type of morals influencing the decisions of our president and his people.
Well, you know, one of the other things that I read was how they used kids on Halloween. This union used kids on Halloween to pass out flyers in opposition to your company, and that in London, because people don't realize you had, do you have a branch in London? Did I read that correctly?
Well, no, what we had is one of our customers in Indianapolis, they get a lot of their funding from the Middle East, and they were having a meeting in London with their shareholders, and they actually took supposedly one of our employees, but we believe it was one that was salted into our ranks, flew that employee over to London and picketed outside there to try and get the investors to pull their money from our customer unless they got rid of us as a cleaning company.
Right. See, you know, it's just their whole tactics. They are so unjust in everything they do. Their tactics are so underhanded. They're thugs. They are true thugs. If you think along the order of some thug out of the ghetto, or you think of Al Capone, or you think of any of those criminals from the 20s and 30s, that's who these people are. They're no different. The only difference is this is 2010 and not 1927.
Well, but the difference is, instead of breaking your fingers or your arm or something like that, it's all psychological warfare, and they try to wear you down through, you know, all the unfair labor practices, the picketing, the OSHA complaints, you know, the Halloween thing you talked about, and until you give in. So it's more psychological stuff. And quite honestly, I know a competitor of mine in Cincinnati that he and his wife almost got a divorce because of it.
Yeah, I'm sure the stress associated with this is just phenomenal. I am certain that it is. I was actually years ago, I've been in unions, I've been in management, I've been involved in hearings at the Labor Relations Board to see who would become part of a bargaining unit for a union formation. So I know what kind of tactics they get involved in. I know what their methodology is. I know their MO. And it's just such a sad thing, because so many people in this country really do not recognize that the unions do not have the best interests of their union members at heart, because if they did, you're a perfect example. You were already paying your employees greater wages than their union counterparts were receiving.
I know, and you know, but the unions do something that they're very good at, and I've tried to tell people this. They are very good at working on people that are easily intimidated or easily manipulated.
Right.
And they know this. So they go after these people, and they fill them with misinformation and lies and all that kind of stuff. And I feel sorry for these people because they don't know any better. And then on top of it, they get all the pressure. And these union people understand that this the type of thing works.
Right.
And I felt so bad for my people. Quite honestly, it was unbelievable. thing. You know, they'd follow people home at night and bang on their doors, and then push their way in when they answered it, and try to get them to sign union cards. And
you know, you wonder, honestly, David, how do these people sleep at night? How in good conscience? I don't know how you could do those things. I could not do those things. So it's amazing to me how these people sleep at night. Obviously, they have no problems, or they would stop what they do. They would stop the tactics. Tell me something, David. How much money has this cost you to date, and where are you in this battle with the SEIU?
Well, we figured over the last, and you know, it's been almost a 5-year battle, because we finally got a final decision on one of the major unfair labor practices in May of this year. But during that time period, we spent around $1 million.
Now, that's $1 million that you could have invested in, perhaps, if that you needed more employees. You could have spent that money hiring more people, creating jobs, coming up with maybe some new product lines, something to increase your business so that you could add on more employees. I mean, what a waste of $1 million.
Well, and that's exactly right. And it's terrible when you look at things like that. And this government does understand that when you go through something like that, something has to give. And usually it's jobs or labor, because that's the most expensive part of your business.
Sure.
And they don't get it.
Well, no, they don't. But how many people does, in this particular administration, how many people does Barack Obama have surrounded? How many has he surrounded himself with who actually have experience in the business sector and are not just these so-called elitists, these ideologues from academia? How many people actually signed the front of a check as opposed to the back of the check, David? I'm sure, maybe one? And I can name them?
I've seen a thing out, and I know how accurate it is, but he's got less people that have been involved in business than any president in history, and it's obvious. And quite honestly, Andy Stern, he just knocked around from job to job after graduating from college, and never was successful until he got into the union, where he could use force and intimidation to get people to do what he wanted.
Right. Well, I read something that said they described him as being like Putin. Russia's
yes,
Putin.
that's exactly right. And you know, and he explains in his book that he just wants to pound people into submission.
Yeah, yeah.
And he tried to do that. I'll tell you one more quick story about what thing they did to us. I was sitting in my office one day, and we clean a college in Cincinnati, and I got a call from OSHA, and they said, "We have a complaint against you." And I said, "Okay, what is it?" And I said, "Well, you have been charged with forcing your employees to carry human body parts out in bags at night."
There you go, huh?
and then that afternoon, the SEIU has all of their foot soldiers in downtown Cincinnati passing out flyers saying we're being investigated for that.
Right.